Let's talk a little bit about the real world.
Yeah.
There was reality TV before MTV.
It was always reality.
Produced the real world, but the real world for me, and I think for most of us, set the model.
Yeah, it paved the way for reality TV, what we know reality TV to be today.
It's interesting because MTV wanted originally to commission a soap opera. They wanted like a Melrose Place or a 90210.
That's right, scripted media.
And it just didn't work, and they thought, you know what, it's a lot cheaper if we don't have to hire actors and writers and makeup people. Let's just pay these students, basically, these kids, $2,500 for a season, and rent a house and maybe send them on a vacation. And like that's the cost of production. Minus the camera crew and the editing. And one thing that I think made it work is it hit this really interesting intersection of video, right? Like where you don't have to use film now to produce stuff. And digital workstations, right? You could use Avid technology now to basically edit 18 hours of footage down into a 22-minute episode without a lot of extra steps that were required if you were using film.
And at that convergence, you create an entirely new kind of television. And the thing, you know, I'm not a big fan of reality TV now. I think it's done things to damage dramatic storytelling on television. But back then, this was awesome. And it was awesome because we were all fooled. We, for the most part, believed these people were actually living out these lives. And they were not what we call today reality stars. People go into reality TV now to have careers in reality TV.
And that was the point that I was going to make is like the early seasons of The Real World are, for the most part, an almost sort of honest look at youth culture at that time.
Yeah, a social
because people hadn't learned to ham it up for reality TV. There was no such thing as going on a reality TV show to create a career, like you're saying. Like this was something of an experiment, and so it's really interesting to take a look at those early seasons and just see the way that people behaved on reality TV then, as opposed to the way they do now.
Absolutely.
One of the great things I think it did is it brought to light a lot of taboo subjects that weren't covered in other media or as predominantly as it did in this show. I mean, it was really, it hit home because, I mean, these were people with real issues, drug addiction, I mean, AIDS, things that weren't being talked about really publicly, and this show was so popular. It was like the Game of Thrones of that time. It was huge for that, and it brought to light a lot of interesting and subjects that needed to be talked about.
Yeah, and we did talk about it. It became water cooler television. You know, you went to school and you talked about what happened on The Real World the night before. You went to work and you talked about what happened on The Real World the night before. And it was engaging and fascinating and hypnotic. And we haven't talked about it. It touched on that sense of voyeurism that exists inside of both of us in kind of a weird little way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think in kind of a weird little way. I mean, that's just blatant. Like, it's voyeurism in the strictest sense.
Well, it's part of it. I think that was the appeal of like Cops and People's Court and some of the shows that preceded this. But I think you make a great point about like the sort of youthful nature of the cast and like the taboo subjects that they touched on. And what's interesting is in other countries, when they've produced series like this, where there's a much more rigid caste structure, it's actually done a lot to break down biases or prejudices, or at least force people to confront those questions in a way that they hadn't before. And when tied into some sort of voting mechanic like there is on American Idol, like really brought to some of these countries a real sense of democracy for the first time. I know in a very limited sense, but like all that comes from Real World.
Yeah,
like, all that comes from
Real World popularized the format, and everything from that point on is reality TV, like what we see today. You know, the Duck Dynasties and the Kardashians, but now it's a lot more manufactured. You know, back then it was just, it's what popularized the format.
I think there'll always be a debate about how real the Real World is, but I imagine it was a lot less artificial.
I think it was a lot less artificial. I mean, from my personal opinion.
Well, one of my first gigs in video, I interned for a guy who was a shooter on the Real World San Francisco, which I think we decided was season 2 or 3.
That was season 3, I think. That was 94 with Pedro and
Puck.
And
he said that even at that point that it was mostly, there was no real reshooting. It was mostly unscripted, which is something that has obviously
changed a lot.
Not the case in subsequent seasons.
I almost wonder if you could get away with making the marketing angle on a new reality show. Hey, the reality show that's actually real. And make it work.
Nobody wants to watch that because it's boring now.
Well,
the thing is, you'd even have to walk that back on the Real World, though, because these are kids who are 18 to 25 years old who are getting paid money to live in a house that they didn't pay for and get sent on vacation. So even if the producers aren't prompting them for drama or conflict, like it's still a little bit unrelatable. But I think in that way, it made it sort of aspirational for the MTV generation. Like they thought, oh, that's really cool. I wish my life was like that.
Yeah.
And there was usually somebody on the show that you could relate to. I mean, they were so diverse just in terms of their casting, and they had people of very different religious beliefs or political attitudes, and obviously different races and different regional backgrounds.
I filled out a real-world application once.
Did you really?
I did.
I
learned a lot about Jared Petty on this episode.
Learning a lot.
I would have liked to have seen that.
You never will.